From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. First, the headlines. Ukraine warns of new wall in Europe as Russian strikes continue. UN political chief says lives of millions of Ukrainians depend on intensified diplomacy. UN chief says at least 10,000 children killed in Yemen conflict. Kashmir files film hailed by Indian PM Modi triggers anti-Muslim hate speech. Georgetown University honors Imam ABDUL Malik Mujahid. Ms. Marvel trailer featuring Kamala Khan gets over 10 million views. Our top story tonight. On day 22 of Russia's invasion, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky gave a powerful virtual address Thursday to the German parliament from the capital, Kyiv. He warned German lawmakers that Moscow is building a new Cold War wall across Europe between freedom and bondage. 3 weeks into the fighting, the toll of Russia's attacks on civilian targets continues to grow. It has fueled accusations of Russian war crimes in Ukraine. Zelensky said Russian shelling had killed 21 more civilians. Russian forces also allegedly bombed a theater sheltering many civilians and marked with the word children. Fighting broke out on the edge of Kyiv Thursday as Russian troops attempted to encircle the Ukrainian capital in their slow-moving offensive. Anti-nuclear campaigner and former mayor of Japan's Hiroshima prefecture urged Russian President Vladimir Putin not to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Tadatoshi Akiba spoke during a news conference Thursday in Tokyo as Russia's war with Ukraine rages on. Akiba started a petition against the use of nuclear weapons. He urged the world's nuclear powers to visit Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the two Japanese cities flattened by U.S. atomic bombs during World War II, to learn about the damage a nuclear attack can bring. He also asked Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to meet Putin and other heads of nuclear weapon states to convey the convictions of the survivors of the atomic bomb blasts. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues, world leaders Thursday emphasized the importance of diplomatic discussions to end the war. Leaders also called for probes of Russian attacks on civilians and infrastructure. Direct talks between Ukrainian and Russian representatives this week gave hope to some that the conflict is moving toward a positive direction. Rosemary DiCarlo, United Nations Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, on Thursday welcomed all such engagements. Yet talks have not translated into the cessation of hostilities that is so desperately needed, she told the UN Security Council. DiCarlo underscored the need for intensified and coordinated political efforts to end the war. U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said on the House floor that establishing a no-fly zone over Ukraine would mean the beginning of World War III. Omar tweeted the U.S. must avoid knee-jerk calls that risk nuclear war. While the U.S. supports Ukraine in its fight against Russian invasion, a no-fly zone is not simply declared. It must be militarily enforced, Omar said. U.S. President Joe Biden and NATO have so far resisted calls, including from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, to declare a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Meanwhile, the civilian death toll and damage to infrastructure in Ukraine has grown, increasing pressure on the U.S. and the military alliance to do more. At least 10,000 children have died in Yemen's nearly 8-year war, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Wednesday. His comments came as international attention remains focused on the war in Ukraine. Though Yemen hasn't been making headlines, the human suffering has not relented, he said. The Yemeni people have suffered death, destruction, displacement, starvation, terror, division, and destitution on a massive scale, he said. Millions of Yemenis are facing extreme hunger, yet the World Food Programme has had to cut rations in half due to the lack of funds, he said. The UN launched an appeal for $4.27 billion to address Yemen's humanitarian crises as international funding runs dry. A Bollywood film about the exodus of thousands of Hindus from Indian-administered Kashmir is fanning anti-Muslim sentiment in India. The Kashmir Files has been praised by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, leader of the Hindu Nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP. The 170-minute Hindi-language movie released last week tells the fictional story of a student who discovers his Kashmiri Hindu parents were killed by rebels. Hundreds of thousands of people fled Kashmir during a revolt against Indian rule in 1989. Many were Hindus, known as Kashmiri Pandits, who later ended up living in camps across northern India. The BJP has supported displaced Hindus seeking an eventual return to Indian-administered Kashmir. Critics say the movie is loose with the facts and targets Indian Muslims even outside Indian-administered Kashmir. Mali's ruling junta has ordered French broadcasters RFI and France 24 off the air. Leaders complain the broadcasters had falsely accused the Malian army of committing abuses, officials said Thursday. The Bamako government categorically rejects these false accusations against the courageous FAMA, Malian Armed Forces, spokesman Colonel Abdul Maiga said. The junta is starting proceedings to suspend broadcasts by RFI and France 24 until further notice, he added. The European Union criticized the ban as unacceptable and said the accusations were unfounded. The French government has also condemned the ban. Last month, Mali ordered French troops out of its sovereign territory. For 25 years, Sheikh Abdul Quddus Azhari has been dreaming about opening an Islamic school in Australia's Northern Territory. He finally succeeded this year after finding the land, getting necessary approvals, and drawing around 35 students. Named the Australian International Islamic College, the school in the city of Darwin is open to students of all faiths. The campus sits on a 50-acre block at Berrima, an industrial suburb in Darwin's east, with several semi-permanent structures acting as classrooms. The school offers primary education for now, but there are plans to expand to include students through 12th grade, with exchange opportunities for foreign students. Australia is home to more than 600,000 Muslims, who make up 2.6% of its population, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. U.S. prosecutors accused China Wednesday of spying on pro-democracy activists and seeking to harass and intimidate a former Tiananmen Square dissident who is running for United States Congress. Attorney Breon Peace announced charges against 5 men involving campaigns to silence, harass, discredit, and spy on U.S. residents for exercising their freedom of speech. Beijing brushed off the allegations on Thursday. Among those accused of conspiring to act as Chinese government spies is Li Qiming, an agent of China's Ministry of State Secretary. Qiming is accused of conspiracy to harass a congressional candidate whose profile fits that of Yan Xian, a former student leader of the 1989 Tiananmen Square pro-democracy protests. Xian fled from China to the United States in 1992 and served as a U.S. Army chaplain and is now seeking a seat in the U.S. House. We're bringing more news stories after the short break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon,
they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Georgetown University awarded Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid the 2021 Building Bridges Lifetime Achievement Award for his work for justice and human rights. The award was presented by Georgetown professor and scholar of Islamic Studies John Esposito. Mujahid is the founder of Justice for All and president of the Sound Vision Foundation. John J. DeGioia of Georgetown University hosted the event at Georgetown's historic Riggs Library. Cardinal BLASE J. CUPICH, Archbishop of Chicago, was also given the Lifetime Achievement Award. Georgetown University's Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding conferred the awards. Previous winners include renowned Catholic theologian Hans Kung and Professor of Islamic Studies Ingrid Mattson. Fatima Siddiqui created a Ramadan market in the area where there never was one for people to support local Muslim makers like herself. The Michigan Ramadan Market will be held on Saturday at Emerald Banquet in Westland. It will feature more than 20 Muslim businesses selling decorations, clothing, handicrafts, food, henna, and children's activities ahead of the month of Ramadan. Siddiqui, who owns Flowing Script, an Arabic and English calligraphy business, founded the market to help promote Muslim businesses in a festive way. Ramadan this year is expected to run from April 2nd to May 2nd in the United States. A group of international students from China at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, staged a walkout Thursday after comments by an Uyghur student about the genocide of her community. They were protesting Fulbright scholar Rizwan Gul Nur Muhammad, who spoke during a weekly speaker series for Cornell's Master in Public Administration program students. Nur Muhammad asked guest speaker Representative Elissa Slotkin, a Michigan Democrat, why the U.S. and the international community have remained silent on the issue of the Uyghur genocide in China. Uyghurs are the most persecuted ethnic minority in China, according to international human rights groups. Nur Muhammad said her brother, Mewlan, was arrested in 2017 during the Chinese government's crackdown on Uyghurs in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. She said she has not been able to speak to her brother since his detention. About 40 Chinese students reportedly walked out while she spoke. A new Marvel series, which will be released June 8th, tells the story of Kamala Khan, a 16-year-old Pakistani-American girl from New Jersey who struggles to fit in at school and home. Marvel dropped the trailer Tuesday for Ms. Marvel, an upcoming Disney Plus series featuring Marvel Studios' first Muslim superhero. The 6-episode Marvel Limited series is directed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, Mira Menon, Adil El-Arbi, and Bilal Fallah. In it, Kamala, played by Iman Vellani, obsesses over superheroes and writes fan fiction about them, particularly the Avengers and Captain Marvel. The trailer shows glimpses of Kamala's life, including praying at a mosque, attending high school, and daydreaming about boys before it transforms with her new superpowers. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Malik Mujahid in Chicago. Just like you, I was moved by that Allahu Akbar lady. She stood her ground, fearful of none, for her hijab and for her education. Sisters and brothers, Indian Muslims are facing a genocide. India does not care for Muslim protesting, but it does care for the world opinion. Therefore, we must push the United Nations. The UN has a responsibility to protect. They must prevent genocide. Please sign this UN petition now. Get others to sign. It will help. Trust me, it will help. We need 1 million signatures, brothers and sisters. Please sign now.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September. I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs. And that's still not enough to put food on the table. I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To discuss the ongoing situation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and attacks on journalists, let's go to Edward Ahmed Mitchell. Over to you, Edward.
Thank you, Samana. Greatly appreciated. Now we move to the discussion of Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. As you all know, it has now almost been 3 weeks since Vladimir Putin ordered his military to attack Ukraine. Bombing is ongoing every day in cities across the country. Hundreds of civilians have been killed. And as we know, thousands of Russian soldiers have also been killed attempting to attack this country. We'd like to discuss today where things stand right now. And in particular, we want to know about the plight facing journalists who are attempting to cover this story, both inside of Ukraine and, for that matter, inside of Russia, the threats they face as they try to get the news out to the public. To discuss this important topic, I'd like to bring on our guest, Mr. Alex Ruffalo, who is a Washington, D.C. based journalist, researcher, and press freedom advocate, who focuses on issues in Europe and Asia. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Edward, for having me on.
A pleasure, a pleasure. So first, tell us a bit about your area of focus. Tell us a bit more about your interest in the subject, and then we'll dive into what's going on right now in Ukraine.
Yes, Edward, I was born in the Soviet Union, and all the post-Soviet countries, unfortunately, had to live this life that Ukraine is right now living. Russia is not letting its former ally states to have their own pathway towards freedom, towards Europe, towards democracy, towards a life that they are trying to choose. Russia always attacks, always tries to, plant conflict in their territories and tries to export its own human rights violations, tries to do its best to hold them back and punish them. Azerbaijan, where I was born, went through the similar, problems. Georgia, next door neighboring country, just a couple of years ago in 2008, went through the same problem. Ukraine, itself went through the same problem in 2014. Russia attacking Ukraine just months after Ukraine made it super clear that it sees its future in the European family. It looks for stability and it looks for democracy and rights. Russia punished them. And the problem is Russia is the largest country in the world, and it can't even go after the largest country in Europe, which is Ukraine, and get away with it. For 8 years, Russia has been doing this in Ukraine. And as you mentioned, President Putin ordered recently attack. Actually, he ordered to re-attack. We are in the fourth week of the war, current, let's say, the brutal battle, but the war itself has been ongoing, for 8 years. And that it did trigger my interest, being born in the region and understanding that, there is no way for our nations to, get away from Russian, influence and get away, to find our way towards democracy without getting united, raising our voice, being together, backing up for one another, and understanding that, this is the gravity we live in.
It's an important point you make that this is not new. I think you just noted yourself that there has been a military conflict going on ever since Russia invaded and took over Crimea and then supported the invasion of the eastern parts of Ukraine. And then you also mentioned the fact that things like this have happened before. You noted Georgia, you noted Azerbaijan. I mean, Chechnya obviously was very briefly independent and a state and then reabsorbed violently into Russia. And so let me ask you this. You noted that you think the way to push back against this is for those who oppose it to unite, especially in Europe. Have you been surprised at the level of unity you've seen among not only European countries, but also the United States in supporting Ukraine? Or do you feel like they're not doing nearly enough to help them fend off this Russian attack?
Well, they're certainly doing way better than they used to do, but that is not enough, because this is not Russia attacking on Ukraine. And this is not about Ukraine per se. It's about Europe. It's about values. It's about principles. It's about the rules-based world standards that we have established and we lived in and we stood up for. So Europe, it did finally understand something that it has been ignoring for many years, is that the only way to fight back Russia is fighting back Russia. There is no fine line between not fighting Putin, stopping Putin, and saving Ukraine. That's the same thing right now, and it became clear every day. Has been becoming clear. We had Ukrainian president just spoke here on the Hill 2 days ago and made it pretty clear. If you ask Russia stop fighting, stop shooting, that means this will be the end of the war. But if you ask Ukraine to stop shooting and stop fighting, that will be end of Ukraine. That's why there is no legitimate reason to put this equal let's say like equality between the two. These are not the same countries. One is there's an invader and there's a country being attacked. So Ukraine unfortunately had to pay this price, but this has been an issue in that part of the world for many years. Unfortunately, Europe, with all these flaws that it has within Europe and also here in the United States, has been letting Putin slide. Putin and his cronies and his oligarchs, get away with what they have been doing in their own countries and also in the neighboring countries, and eventually it's bouncing back. And I'm so glad that the European family and the United States finally are on the same page and united. But this is not nearly enough. Unfortunately, Russia has been using every textbook human rights violations inside the country, outside the country, putting out very clear statements are appreciated, but they're not nearly enough, unfortunately.
And another thing, would you agree that one of the other things, long after this conflict hopefully ends, and hopefully soon, God willing, that America and Europe should do is to exercise consistency in international relations? For example, invading other countries is always wrong, right? Whether it's Ukraine or Iraq or Syria, and bombing civilians is always wrong, whether they're Ukrainians or Palestinians or Syrians or anyone else. It seems one of the things you would agree that we could all benefit from is everyone playing by the same rules all around the world. And that way, when someone gets out of line, you not only have the physical authority to hold them accountable, but the moral authority to do so. What is being done to Ukraine, Putin did this, maybe even worse, in Aleppo, in Syria. Some years ago, and is still doing it. So what do you think about it? Do you think that we should be using this as an opportunity to, especially journalists, to highlight these sorts of injustices and violations of international law whenever they occur, no matter who's doing it?
I thank you for this question, Edward. What makes Ukraine's story unique is we need to figure out what this conflict is not about first. This is not the traditional conventional conflicts we have seen in the last couple of decades on the map. It's not conflict between Palestine and Israel, two countries from different backgrounds, different religions are involved. As you mentioned, other countries, Syria, democracy. There's not conflict between, let's say, authoritarian country attacking another brutal authoritarian dictator. What Syrian dictator has been doing, inside Syria, did reflect some sort of response, both inside Syria and outside of Syria. The story of Ukraine is unique because this is about people are fighting for their own future. They're not attacking at anyone. And they have been, by the way, deemed to be even by Russian president himself, Putin himself, the cousins of Russians. This is about two nations having same shared history, shared values, shared language, shared background, shared history. The only reason why Putin does what he does right now, is doing, is that because he did not like the pathway that Ukrainians chose, which is democracy, freedoms, rights. This is authoritarian, dictatorship attacking, targeting democracy and democratic values that, Ukraine is much more smaller in comparison with, Russia. Yes, it is the largest country in Europe. Smallest country, one of the smaller countries in his neighborhood. This is the 21st century. It's not 20th century dictator, as I mentioned previously, trying to take over territory and then moving on and, imposing his own values. There is no Russian value involved here. All the rules-based, let's say, I mentioned before, like, system, but it's not a system, like values that we have established and lived in and cherished for many years are broken here. I mean, yes, you cross a border, you send out like 200,000 soldiers to take over entire country in order to stop them from going towards where they have chosen to go, which is not you, because you are not recognize the same freedoms that they are looking for to your own people. I mean, Russian people are missing here, the bigger picture. We're missing to talk about them. And there's a very huge conversation going on right now, how to, draw that clear line between freedom fighters in Russia and Putin Russians. Russian people have been in this mess for decades, and we failed them. And we failed Russian media. When Putin, again, tried to impose this every textbook human rights violation inside the country, we thought, this is not our concern because this is about Russia and Russians. But now, one thing we failed to understand is it was going to bounce back at some point. And we empowered Putin. Each time we turned our blind eyes to human rights violations that came out, happened in Russia, we empowered Putin.
Yeah, and I think of, Alex, to jump in, I think of Anna Politkovskaya, who was a journalist who was murdered on Vladimir Putin's birthday years ago. And she was someone who's vocally covering war crimes being committed in Chechnya. So we have to close, but let me ask you one question. Tell us a bit about the importance of journalists to this issue, journalists in Russia, Ukraine. Tell us a bit about that aspect of it, press freedom.
There are two different angles here. Thank you so much for this question. One is, of course, history of press freedom violations happening in Russia, and also what's going on right now on the ground. Journalists must not be a target, of wars. But right now we have between 4 and 5. So I've heard different numbers. Journalists have already been killed. We have, just as we speak today, one of the most famous female reporters just got kidnapped. We haven't heard back from her. The last couple of hours, according to her family members, that she has been kidnapped. So we don't know exactly, what is going on down there. So there are not press freedom organizations on the ground that can actually document these violations. Unfortunately, media, there is no free media in Russia. As soon as the war broke out, Putin was too quick to pass a law, basically banning a different narrative, any narrative that goes beyond, the narrative that he wants to see inside Russia. So some reporters just had to leave the country because just writing about the war, even using the word "quote unquote" war, would cause them be jailed for 15 years. After 15 years, so some reporters left the country. International media had to leave the country. Unfortunately, Russian people are deprived of the truth. The only story they have been hearing during the past 4 weeks is a story that Putin wants them to hear and believe in. So that's the consequence, the price that they have to pay. And in the international community, obviously, we are not able to operate there. That media also are not able to, get their side of the story,
right.
Understand them. And so this is the reality.
Yeah, I mean, that's key because the Russian people might be quite upset if they knew what was really going on. It would be, imagine when President Bush invaded Iraq 20 years ago and it went horribly and all these Americans were being killed and there were no weapons of mass destruction. Imagine if Bush had the power to just ban American media from reporting what was really going on. There'd be no way for us to get upset, no way for us to protest, even know we had something to protest about. And that essentially, it sounds like what Russia has done, that they have shut down most media outlets' ability to tell the truth in Russia. Therefore, the Russian people don't know what's going on and can't speak up. And so I know journalists like you are trying desperately to get the truth out there, and we wish you well in that endeavor. And we hope that, I think many people hope this conflict will end very soon, this invasion will be come to an end very soon, and that we will hopefully after this see consistency in international affairs, that countries, no matter it's Russia, the United States, anyone else, will stop invading other people's territory, bombing civilians. This is horrific, and we've seen it far too often after we thought this sort of thing would stop. Alex, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Greatly appreciate it. And we hope to have you back again as we continue to learn more about the situation. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Alex. And now, Samana, we'll go back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.